Welcome to Built to Win, the podcast created to help you level up your business game by developing a success mindset made for the long run. In this episode, Neora's Dave Fleming talks with Brett Duncan, co-founder of The Juice and president of Strategic Choice Partners, about entrepreneurship, innovation, and the evolving identity of the direct selling industry. Dave and Brett cover a wide range of topics, including the power of authentic storytelling, the role of social media in business growth, and why simplicity and human connection are more vital than ever.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Built to Win. This episode is, this is a long time coming, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation. With me is Brett Duncan, who is the co-founder of direct selling industry event called The Juice that is held couple of times a year in different locations, and also the co-founder president of Strategic Choice Partners, which is a robust consulting firm in the direct selling space. And as somebody who participates in the direct selling space, Brett and I have known each other for a while. I don't even know how long now, but always interesting to get a conversation going with Brett, talk about the industry, what's happening. And Brett, for people who don't know you, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dave. And yes, we have known each other for a while and the years merged together, but great to be on here. Brett Duncan, I live in the Dallas area, grew up in Kentucky, but have been in Dallas a long, long time. And I got started in direct selling way back in 2002, had zero career aspirations other than it was a job. It was to be quite honest, I think I heard that they had chair massages there like once a month. I was like, that sounds good. I'll work there. Right. But like so many of us, direct selling gets a hold of you and it doesn't let go. And so that was at a company called Advocare. I was head of marketing there by the time I left the industry for a couple of years, only to really kind of figure out, I think I just left my niche. And so I was able to come back into the industry with another company in the space here in the Dallas area, Manatech, and left there as their vice president of global marketing. And then in 2014, decided to start a consulting firm. And when I say firm, I mean, I decided personally to start consulting. There wasn't much there. My thought was, hey, I'll give some advice and people will like that. But it quickly became, that all sounds great. How much of it can you do for us? And so it grew, and I partnered with a man after that named Alan Luce, who's an absolute legend in direct selling. He and I started Strategic Choice Partners together. It's a consulting firm that offers all kinds of services for direct selling companies. And Alan unfortunately passed away about 4 years ago, but I carry on. And then in the midst of that as well, we started, as you mentioned, an event and a platform called The Juice. And it's just a gathering of direct selling executives. We keep it pretty informal, and we talk about what people want to talk about, what's working, what's not working, what's next. Dave has had the privilege of speaking at The Juice before, and it's still one of my favorite presentations for sure.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
But you don't have to say that.
I don't have to, but I did anyway. Yes.
All right. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, take us back. A lot of people who listen to Built to Win are entrepreneurs, run their own businesses. I know that there's a fair amount that are in direct selling. Direct selling is one of the biggest kind of entrepreneurial ventures like in North America. 1 in 6 households is participating in direct selling. But I want to talk about the decision that you made now more than 10 years ago. What was the driver where you said, you know what, I'm gonna hang my own shingle. I'm going to start consulting. Like what was the motivation for that? And what was the moment where you decided that was what was next for you?
Yeah, good question. And it's even when I started my position, like going into starting the position at Manatech, which would have been 5 years before I started my own business, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know exactly what it looked like, but it was just something in me, it felt right. And I don't know how else to explain it. I've talked to other people. It wasn't like I was looking at it on, this is how you go make real money, or I had this burning desire. I did have an interest in consulting. It was I was very, very interested in being able to work with different companies. That was attractive to me. And, I will say my dad was an entrepreneur in a very, very different ways, very operational, very hands-on, but he started several businesses. He never really talked to me about it, but obviously I observed that growing up and benefited from it. And so I'm sure there's some of that in me as well. But I will say it's it has most definitely been the right fit for me. Even outside of direct selling, I've started little businesses here and there. When you get that entrepreneurial niche and you realize you kind of, I shouldn't say got it in you, because I think everyone's got it in them, but when you get comfortable with it, is probably the better way to look at it. When you get comfortable with what's possible, you might start doing projects that in hindsight maybe you shouldn't have done, but it's the fact that you can do it, that you're like, okay, so now I find myself in my mid 40s kind of trying to, all right, let's be wise about what we do. Don't just do something because you can do it, but do it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And I think you're right too. I think a lot of people have that in them, but I think there's also a lot of fear, kind of like fear of the unknown, really.
yeah,
I mean, just in your journey, how did you experience that first of all? And if you did, how did you manage
yeah.
that and how did you get over
Well,
it?
well, and I'll get uber practical for a second, because it still comes up to this day. People will they're afraid of insurance. They're like, oh, how am I going? If you've been an employee all your life or whatever, you just hey, insurance comes with a job, right? And obviously, then I had to look at it. But when you look at your check and you look at what's being pulled out of it to pay that insurance, or what you're still having to pay, and you do the math, I remember even at the time, and that's when companies paid typically better, on insurance. It's like, okay, it was like $800. And I was like, I had this moment where I was like, doing what I'm about to go do, can I go make an extra $800? And I was like, heck yeah, I can. I was like, okay, then this is not a reason not to do this.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, it's crazy. I talk to people all the time, but that a lot of times is what's either holding them back or holding the family back. And I'm just like, do the math and see what it's about. Beyond that, just the comfort level. Of course, there was fear. I was very methodical in how I personally did it. And, I was able to have a long runway. I gave my company a long, like a 3-month notice. Obviously, they could have said, nope, get out of here now, but they didn't. But in doing that, it allowed me ethically to also start telling people, hey, I'm going to be available and doing this 3 months from now. And I would, any type of runway you can create, I think, however that might look, is smart.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice too. Is like do the math and just know at least kind of what you're getting into and what is the nut that you have to cover every month. I'm curious, as a consultant, you mentioned you get to work with a lot of different companies, and for me personally, like I can speak to the value of someone who has seen the inside of the boardrooms and had the conversations with multiple different companies and can bring that knowledge into a building. And so I'm a big fan of experts and consultants in any space, because I do think there's huge value in that. On the flip side, I wonder sometimes, like, do you ever wish that you could start and finish projects with
Yes.
the same brand?
Yeah. It's a constant tug. It's, again, the grass is always greener, right? So it's like,
Of course, yeah.
um, but it's that can be attractive. The team building aspect too. I'm able sometimes to step in with companies and serve in longer term, almost fractional roles. I had one client I was pretty involved with them for 3 years.
Mm,
And, I realized, like, I really missed building a team, managing a team. And not that I've got people on that, work with SCP, but it's different. We're all collectively working on this project, that project versus, okay, really building it up. And so that's always, who knows what my future holds there, but that's always something that kind of I tug back. And then, just calling it like it is. The joke in consulting is you can give all the advice in the world, but you're also exposed to oftentimes a lot of people not following that advice, or
sure.
following it in the way that they feel like is right, even though you've told them, like, here's what I really think you ought to do. And you're not in charge 100%, right? So
Hmm.
you are there to provide guidance. And I think taking on a coaching mentality, to where, and again, I'm certified in coaching. And so, like, the true coaching is, Dave, you have the answers for you. I'm here to help you discover what your answers are for you. Right. And so when I put that lens on, it always feels better, because I'm like, and it works. It probably works better too, because I truly believe
Sure.
that. Like, there's not a formula. I can't copy and paste company to company and all of that. I'm a big believer in, yes, there's big best practices to look at. Yes, there's trends. Yes, there's things that no doubt work or don't work, but your company, your culture is a unique thing. And because of that, we need to figure out what uniquely makes sense for you.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think that's where some people kind of they misunderstand what a consultant, at least a good and I'm gonna I'm gonna share a lot of my own opinion on this. People can disagree with me because that's fair. It's free. You can you can disagree with what I say, um but I think there's the really truly valuable consultants in any space are bringing ideas to the table, but not just because they've seen them work in other places, but like you said, every company is so unique and so different, and just copying and pasting something from another company is almost guaranteed not to work. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but that's kind of my personal bias is like, and I see it a lot. Like companies will launch a product, and then pretty soon you'll see other companies launch a similar product, and then they don't get the results, and they're like, well, and they'll come up with lots of reasons why it didn't work. But it comes back to, in my opinion, like it was never the right fit in the first place.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you do, and it can be tempting. I mean, there's other consultants that are out there. Let's take like compensation plan design, for example. You could walk into a company, and this happens all the time with me, and it's like they don't even have to tell me who designed their plan. It's like, oh, that's a this plan or that's a that plan. And not
Hmm.
to say when I design plans, I'm sure there's elements of like, hey, that's a Brett plan too. But you know, I know it. What irritates me is when clearly someone has come in and, for the most part, this is the plan we build. This is what you bought, and this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I see it a lot of times. They'll take it. This isn't all consultants, by the way. There's some really good consultants in our space. Um, but they'll come in and especially younger companies who don't know, maybe haven't done this before, and it's just so it just goes back to experience and wisdom and who you partner with and all those good things. That it's like if it looks like it's too much of a cookie cutter process, then it's probably not right.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff I want to get into with you, Brett, because
Let's do it.
a lot of stuff. You came into direct selling in, I think you said 2002. I came in 1999. So we were like
Yeah.
roughly the same period of time. And then we both I know we both had stints outside the industry. Um, but yeah, you come back to it. So I'm curious, just from your perspective, the 30,000 foot view, how much have you seen change between 2002 and 2025 when we're recording this in the direct selling space?
Yeah. I'd say that a ton. And there's been, like anything, there's been milestones. Like I can remember my time outside, or even as I was coming to the end of my first, period there when I was working at Advocare, I personally was getting into, at the time, blogs were new and a big deal and different, and that's actually how I got into digital marketing. I was like, I'm just going to start my own, didn't know it was, again, it was almost like a weblog, right? It's like a journal or whatever and talk about it. But, the fact that I could jump on WordPress and go build it myself, I learned that was my digital marketing education, right? Like jumping in and
Sure.
doing that. And so I go forward, and a few years later, I'm at a DSA conference, and they're talking about blogs, but they're talking about how evil they are, and how bad they are for direct selling, and watch out for all of this stuff. And so I think it just shows where there's always the human reaction to anything new, especially technology, is instantly protect what we know and protect what we have. And I don't fault any of us. I'm included. I will do that too. I don't fault any of us for taking that. But if you look back at instances like that, if you look back at people who built their business on fax machines, if you look back, whatever, it's like, the trend doesn't care, right?
Yeah.
And so that's great, everything that you're saying there. But it's not going to stop what's happening, and I think the more you live, obviously, you realize, oh, that's the most normal thing in the world, right? Is whatever we've gotten used to, will not be that way 10 years max, probably less.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
the speed of change since the year 2000 has only been increasing, and then we're seeing like just incredible rapid change on a massive scale with technology and with AI and all kinds of other things. And I want to dive into that too. But before we
Yeah.
before we do that, because here's one thing that I am fairly staunch supporter of this idea, which is that the principles of direct selling have essentially been the same since this concept was invented, but the tactics have changed
Mhm.
considerably. And so, from as a consultant to the industry, like how would you talk to somebody who's like in that position that you just described? Like the
Yeah.
writing is on the wall. Companies need to modernize, they need to embrace new technologies, but companies, they want to keep doing what they've always done because that's how they built their business, that's how they grew their success, and they don't want to change.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to rattle through a couple like Brett consulting sound bites. And then, you stop me where we need to go. But to answer that question, because I think that it does. And I will say this, I'm not just saying this because it's the name of your podcast, but I think the idea of being built to win. There are a lot of companies, especially 10 years and older, they don't realize it, but they're built to survive, or that's their mindset right now. And they don't know why they're not growing. And a lot of companies are not playing to win. And when and that sounds like, I've heard people tell me that. Sometimes I'm like, well, why in the world would I play? But if I really step back, like, why am I playing? And it's easy to get into that. Hey, we need to protect what we've got. Uh, Not very noble concept. It's not a growth mindset, though, right?
Mhm.
Protecting what I got is not a growth mindset. And at the corporate level, which is where I spend most of my time, the corporate side has to, above all else, prompt growth, right?
Mhm.
The way I put it is we've got to focus on making the pie bigger rather than making the slices bigger. And sometimes, the people who have our ear might be saying, I need a bigger slice. And it's like, well, the best way for us to get you a bigger slice is to just make for a bigger pie. And so that's what companies are constantly dealing with, I think. And again, I will agree with you too. The principles I don't think have changed within direct selling. Certainly how we do it. There's probably a principle here and there that you have to think about differently. But the other thing I always say is the fundamental unit of success in direct selling. And by the way, I think any business is a conversation. That's the
Mhm.
fundamental unit, which sounds very simple. But I'll just take Neora, for example. If someone's not first talking about Neora, none of the other good stuff that can happen about Neora happens, right?
Yeah.
And when you really dig in with a lot of entrepreneurs today, their business might be struggling because they're simply not having enough conversations about it.
Mm.
Just the pure math of it. Sometimes it's like, hey, the volume isn't there to lead to down the funnel. And so I think that's big time important. I think where we as in direct selling especially get caught up is we tend to care more about how we want to sell than how they want to buy.
Oh yeah. Oh, say more about that.
Yeah, yeah. I figured. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll take a let's take a party plan company, right? I love party plan companies. There's been some great ones that have come out. I think you've been involved in some in the
Yeah.
past, right?
Sure.
And you know, they're built on this idea. Originally, it was, hey, nothing gets sold unless it's at somebody's house with a group around, which is an awesome concept. To this day, when that still happens, they're highly productive. But most party plan companies are struggling with just making them happen.
Hmm.
And yet now you add digital to that, you add software to that, and all this software has been made, or I should say band-aided together to make
Yeah.
that party order somehow, some way happen. And what you'll see a lot of times is because we're a party plan company, it's our identity. Then therefore, when you take that on as your identity, then all guns are pointed to making the party work. In the meantime, society is telling you it's not that we're against that, but there's so many other things that are happening now. We just can't do it like we used to do.
Hmm.
And it's very natural to say, well, let me convince you why you should. Let me convince you why the way I want to sell to you is better than what you're thinking, you know? And then you'll
Yeah.
jump in on those. Half the time the party is not actually happening at home. It's happening, hey, just a collection of orders online. And so, Dave, you come to me ready to buy my product.
Hmm.
You're like, I'm going to a website and buy it. And what I do is your consultant is, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't do that. What I need you to do is actually go to the site. Then I need you to find this party. Then I need you to put it in here. And so that's just an example. When you step back for a second, why in the world would I ever stop someone from buying from me? If
Yeah.
that happens, something's wrong. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, I think a lot of party plan companies and beyond that are facing, okay, how do we? And then, by the way, I don't want party plan companies going anywhere. I'm a big fan of if people want to gather at your house and buy my product, I don't ever want to stop that. But the
sure.
mechanics of it, and how we build around that needs to look a little different.
No, I totally agree with that. And it's really interesting too, because, you've been in this business and around this business is, almost as long as I have. And one of the big kind of turning points in direct selling was kind of right around the year 2000 when, e-commerce started to become a thing. And ironically, there were a few companies that were kind of born as e-commerce companies, and then there were other companies that adopted e-commerce really early on. And and ironically, it was direct selling companies that adopted e-commerce more rapidly than almost any other brick and mortar, because it was easy, right? Like, direct selling companies don't have brick and mortar places to go shop and buy and feel things and sample things. And so it was kind of a logical entrance into e-commerce. And that was, between about 1999 and about 2005, I remember, was kind of massive technological revolution within direct selling. And it was super exciting. It was really cool. I haven't seen that level of technological adoption since then, though. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you would agree with that or not, but for me, I feel like direct selling for a while was kind of leading in technology, and now over the last 10 to 15 years has kind of fallen behind that technological revolution. And feel free to disagree or agree or whatever, but I'm curious
Yeah,
what your
yeah.
thought is.
No, that was a golden moment. And even I would say even leading up the rest of that, even up to 2010, when social media started getting,
Mhm.
involved a little bit and you had younger companies. It's always the younger companies, most of the time, not always, but because they don't have the baggage, they're able to jump in and try something. And, it's like, okay, great. There's no one we can irritate by changing because they're not with us yet, or, all that. The that's a whole other side note, but the real key to being a 10 plus year old company in direct selling is how do you transition, like mastering the transition. That's the real work.
Yeah.
Especially with a volunteer sales force. But going back on technology, yeah, I would agree with you. um, I think some of it's probably had to do with, again, social media and the use of it, and what in direct selling we would have called replication, replicated sites, or getting a link, or getting an affiliate link, or getting a referral, or all of that. That's caught up to such a degree, and it's even like exploded to where, hey, TikTok has, you can handle your whole e-commerce experience within that, right? You can do it in
Yeah.
Instagram, and so with that, the rest of the world's not only caught up, but also I think some of the systems that we have, or that we have been founded on, have tried to figure out, okay, well, how do we then handle within these outlets that want to sell and want to see that happen? And I think that's where the struggle is right now, is figuring out how to do that. And it is tough. Like, as soon as you think you've got it figured out, it's like, oh, but we didn't think about this, and this. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, you have the modern social seller who's also like, yeah, I don't just sell your product either, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And then on top of that, direct selling companies, used to direct sell, the reason companies would choose direct selling is because, hey, we let the field do the marketing. And now not only is it expected for corporate to do that, the modern social seller is like, not only do I expect you, like, I'm not joining a company unless they do some of this stuff for me. So it's actually become, I think, in a lot of ways, like an attractant. Like, oh, I want companies to reach out to my customers. I want companies to, um, do marketing automation. Whereas before, it was very much and I remember working in this, it was very much you leave my customers alone, I got them taken care of. Um,
Yeah. I remember that. It was like kind of like, yeah, kind of like hands off my business
right.
kind of attitude that was, especially kind of like the late 90s and into the 2000s. But I think you're right. And as e-commerce and kind of social commerce has evolved, and I loved what you said about the social media, because I think direct sellers were among the first to figure out how to monetize their social
Hmm.
networks. And
Yeah.
so Facebook and Twitter and Instagram come along, and direct sellers were kind of perfectly positioned to turn that into a source of revenue, because They could no longer, now it wasn't just people who could come to a party at my house. It was, I could now reach people literally around the world. And as long as my company could provide products, I could make sales anywhere.
Yeah.
And that was a, yeah, so that is true. That was a big, that was a big turning point again. And then of course the pandemic happens and everybody's on social media and then they're in their house and then nobody wanted to party. Nobody wanted to go
Right.
out. And so
Yeah.
and it's interesting because what we're seeing now is that we're very much seeing in our growth, and we're on a pretty good growth
Yeah.
curve at the moment. And you're always grateful for that, but we're seeing kind of a hybrid of kind of that traditional get together and socialize mixed with the social media aspect, and those two things kind of working together is where we're seeing most of our growth. And so it's interesting to see the just how things change over the years and the different trends that come and go. But the principle of that conversation, like you said, having that
Exactly.
conversation is still core and it's still front and center in all of the direct selling business.
To me, that's like social media is the great conversation multiplier, right? It's an amplifier. Now, you could argue in some cases maybe the conversations haven't been as deep as they used to be. Um, but you could also say no, they're just as deep. And there's certainly generations who would say, I don't know the difference, and this is where I find depth. And so I think you see all that happening, but I think that's where again, keep focusing. However a conversation happens, that's what we have to focus on, right?
Yeah.
Constantly. And it can look so many different ways.
Yeah. No, and I agree with your earlier statement when you said like the company's job is to create reasons to have those conversations.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've not said it that same way to my teams, but I say, we're creating what we're creating at the company level is the best possible business building environment, which means that there's got to be a reason for people to talk about your company.
Yeah.
And we will die on this hill at Neora, but I think every other direct selling company would. I don't think this is very controversial, but we still 100% buy into the fact that a personal recommendation is the most valuable form of advertising that exists.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to ask you about, especially because we're seeing like a lot of technological innovation, especially on the AI front. Lots of companies like embracing AI, generating AI content for social media, and there's kind of a lot of noise in social media right now. And my take is this: I think that the direct selling is perfectly positioned to take advantage of the noise, kind of cut through the noise because of that personal recommendation. And whether you meet through social media or it's somebody that you've known since high school, but you've got that personal relationship. And so, yeah, embrace all the AI content, generate the AI content, but anchor it in that personal relationship. And I think that's where you really have an opportunity to thrive. And I don't know if you've seen the same thing with the companies you're working with, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what I that's kind of what I suspect is going to happen over the next few years.
No, I tend to agree with you. I think I mean, we're already seeing it. I think we're in the early stages of frustration with an AI world in terms of what can I believe that I'm seeing online, and so I do think those real connections, those genuine connections are they're going to become, it's supply and demand, right? So
Yeah.
the supply of those is going to go down, therefore the demand will go up. And who knows what the consumer reaction is going to be to that, but at some point they're going to get fed up, you know. There's always a yin to the yang, and so whatever's being produced now, and it's really not AI is going to change everything, not just direct selling. It's going to change all kinds of things, right?
Sure.
And so just like the internet did, it's like, okay, it's not. So I mean, I use it every day, some form or fashion, learning new ways to use it every day. So I think we have to look at it also in terms of, okay, what's being done with it? Like,
Hmm.
how can we leverage it? We don't have to have it all figured out day one. I mean, one of the things I worry about is the reverse of what you just said. There's tools and capabilities coming out that are pretty much, telling the sales force or showing them how, hey, you just tell us a little bit about you, let us go scrape some of your stuff, and we'll just crank out everything for you. And there's not going to be a way to really stop that, just because of everything going on. But I also The other thing I worry about is if the returns on that end up diminishing because it's just more noise, then
Yeah.
there's either going to be an opportunity for some other company to do better with it, or people are just going to be like, well, I guess that doesn't work either. And so I think we
Yeah.
have to really keep an eye on that.
Yeah. No, that's well said because I think, just because you're leaning into AI doesn't mean that it is going to be more or less effective than whatever you were doing before AI. I think
Yeah, right.
that's a business principle that I think, you gotta understand what it is you want to accomplish with whatever technology. Because I think there was, if you look back just not that long, but just a few years, there was kind of a movement within direct selling to try to automate the direct sellers' activities.
Right.
And we kind of saw that backfire because people disengaged from the inauthentic communication and the auto funnels and all those things. And yes, some people really thrived in that environment and got a lot of customers, but their customers weren't really that sticky. And you're starting now to see some of those companies that were built on automating the direct seller are disappearing, or they're pivoting
Yeah.
and doing something different, which I think is a good thing because like I said earlier, we still believe and will always believe that that personal recommendation, that personal relationship is the core to success in a direct selling business.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reminded of this just this. I think I told you I was from Kentucky, and I rarely go back to Kentucky, but I was there just this last weekend. And so I went to my local distillery there, right? And had them, they went through all their bourbons. And if you've been to a wine tasting, you know what that's like. And I left there thinking in terms of direct selling because I can't get away from it. It's like, I probably thought too highly of that bourbon and I probably bought too much of it leaving there. And it probably won't ever taste the same as it did in that moment. Why is that? And it's because we get wrapped up in the story. We get wrapped up in, you're telling me all about, where this came from and how it was made. And there's also not a lot of clutter. I'm talking to a real person. He's an expert, and he's not showing me other stuff. He's showing me their stuff. And so I got caught up in that. And I was like, we all talk about story, but that's the tangible thing I think sometimes we might be overlooking, which could be a superpower, used to be a superpower, still could be. And I still think most people, even on social media, influencers, whatever, they're adding their story to it, right? The most successful ones are able to do that. And so
Sure.
I think especially in direct selling, I think other entrepreneurs, it's kind of grabbing an affiliate link here or whatever. It's like, okay, if you're just trying to push it out like everybody's pushing it out, it probably won't attract most of us. But we do
Yeah.
like the story.
Yeah. No, and the story, because like it's an old advertising adage that said, I think it says something to the effect of like stories sell and statistics tell, and there's
Yeah,
somehow, right, something like, I probably butchered that, but
I think it's great. Dave Fleming. There we go.
yeah, yeah, put that on somebody's whiteboard somewhere. But because it is ultimately, it's the emotion. It's not the statistics. Like this, and when I was studying my MBA, like our marketing professor, he made this point very clearly. He was like, you got to understand that the marketing story is what sells the product. The statistics and the data and really all of that and how you slice the data, that really only exists to validate the
Yes,
emotional decision that
that's
somebody's
right.
making about your
They're the
product.
kickers. I call them the kickers. It's like
Yeah,
important, but no one's buying it because of that stat. They're justifying
exactly.
why they bought it with that stat.
Right.
Yeah.
You're buying your product because they're looking at it going, yeah, I can make meals in my kitchen without spending hours in prep, right?
Yeah.
Or I can feel better, feel younger because I'm taking your product. I can envision myself benefiting from the product that you're selling. And that's the one thing I will say about direct selling companies is that the majority of direct selling companies offer great products.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you're like, okay, well, that's not that great, but the majority of companies, because they do their research, they do their studies, they bring things to the table that are generally pretty darn good products, but they do need a storyteller to explain why they're better than what you're buying off the shelf at your big box retailer down the street.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the magic. That's part of the beauty of the industry that we find ourselves in. I'm curious. looking down the road, like we talked a little about the technology, we talked about some other things, but where do you see the future of direct selling heading?
Yeah, well, I have all the answers there.
Good. That's why you're in your seat and I'm in mine.
Right. Yes. Yes. No, I think you kind of set me up for that because I do think, yes, most direct selling companies have great products, but I feel like we're seeing a surge, like a big leap forward in product innovation, like overall. And like the types of products that can actually be, you're seeing more digital products, if you will, or digital companions or digital capabilities, which before was we just didn't think of. You're seeing more like what felt like almost off limit product categories now finding their way into direct selling. There's certainly, the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of services have boomed, and they think about it differently. So I think the other thing for direct selling, you're getting a lot of founders, and this is a good thing. A lot of founders coming in who are thinking really fresh about what to do with the channel, and one of the things I do think, and I'm sure you would agree with me, our identity determines what we do. And so when we take on the identity of being a direct seller, and I think we should, but that's going to direct some of your decisions sometimes, and it might blind you to other considerations sometimes. And what I challenge companies a lot of times to do is, okay, step back. This isn't permanent, but don't think of yourself as a direct selling company. That's just a channel of distribution for a moment. And when you can think of it that way, what does that open your mind to in terms of what's possible? And I'm not saying you throw out things that are competitive. I'm saying, I see a lot of times we get stuck in how we think something's supposed to operate, that we don't consider really great ideas that are just on the outskirts of that.
Yeah.
And so when you feel like, okay, that doesn't have to be my identity. And then you bring it back and you say, and now we can bring in this element of what drives us so much in building people and helping them build businesses. That's magic,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. Because I think, and I agree with everything that you just said about direct selling. And my personal take on it is I think, I mean, like any industry or any sales channel is going to go through some ups and some downs, some pivots, some innovations. And I think we're in direct selling, we're definitely in one of those periods where there's a lot of new stuff being tried. There's a lot of new ideas being floated. And I don't think anybody's landed on what exactly the future direct selling company looks like. But here's my takeaway is that I think what you said earlier is 100% correct, is that we've got to stop thinking about how we sell and think more about how the consumer purchases, and just making that as simple. Like, it's so easy to shop online right now. Why aren't direct selling companies following suit? Like, why aren't we making it just as easy to, get on a subscription for your favorite nutritional supplement or your skincare regimen? Why are we jumping through hoops or making our customers jump through hoops to give us their money?
Yes.
Um, so I think that, yeah, so I think that's a really, really good point that you made. Um, Back to, boy, there's so much we could talk about, but I want to go back to something because I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are business owners or direct sellers, entrepreneurs of whatever kind of lots of different areas. But I want to get this kind of the Brett Duncan, been there, done that, free advice for people who are out there listening. What advice would you give somebody who's looking at starting their own business, whether it's direct selling or any other business?
Yeah. Wow. You hear this all the time. Cash flow is truly king. And so figuring out, um, don't don't bank on the volume will make up the difference, right? If you can build a business that is profitable, with medium, low, or high volume, like that's the key. And it's very hard to do that when you start out, but to get there as quickly as you possibly can is actually a really big deal. I used to not think that way. I used to have someone in my life who you would know, I won't mention them by name, but a couple generations ahead of me who told me that, and I just thought it was crazy. And now here I am. I'm like, he knew exactly what he was talking about, because you need the freedom to make, you need the comfort and the freedom to make the right decision versus I have to do this because I got to pay a bill. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Which can get
sure.
you into a mess sometimes. And so part of that is the entrepreneurial journey. You have to experience for yourself to know what it really is. But hey, anything you can do to stop that, you will be glad that you did. Um, and by the way, not to say like I have this horror story personally of that, I don't, but um, I've certainly seen where I've taken on projects or taken on work or decided to do something that was driven mostly by I got to generate revenue versus here's where I bring the most value. Uh,
Yeah.
and interestingly, there's been times where I have stopped doing something that probably monetarily didn't make sense, but I'm like, I have got to get back to what I do best. And thank the good Lord, when I've done that, usually within 1, 2 months of that, the phone starts ringing randomly or whatever, because I'm able to focus on what I do best and I start getting the work that I want. The other way I would put it is one of my favorite questions to ask clients is, what would you clone? If there's a sales process, if there's a person on your team, if there's an experience you've had in your business that you could clone, if you're like, that's the person I'd like 10 of, that's the sales process I'd like to see 3 times a week. Look at it, break it down, and try to figure out why, and then build a targeting business and a targeting model around that's who I want to go attract. Whatever that is, that's what I want to bring in.
Oh, I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. That's last question for you, and we'll let you get back to helping lots of companies be their best company self. But
Right.
what where do you find the most fulfillment? I mean, probably similar to what you just described, but um, outside of work or inside work, when do you get to the end of the day and say that was a good day?
Oh yeah. I do. I mean, truly things like these, like conversations, mastermind groups, I'll host those every once in a while. That's where I always feel like I'm at my best personally in terms of doing that. Um, yeah, and it's rarely when I get at the end of a work day or going into it, where I feel energized is usually when I've shared an idea or I've had a conversation about an idea with someone. A lot of times it was unplanned. So it's very rarely on the scheduled project touch base, And I'm not
Mhm.
saying those are bad. It's just I don't typically hang up and like, yeah, but when I can have a conversation with someone and even have my thinking challenged a little bit, I don't like it in the moment, but then to chew on it,
Mm.
it energizes me. I feel alive.
Sure.
Which I think is good because then I'm able to go in, shut that down, and have a little bit more energy than normal on the family front, and hopefully bring more to that
Yeah.
as well. And so, yeah, that's a good question. I'll probably have a different answer if you ask me an hour from now,
That's okay.
but yeah, that was good.
Yeah, depends on the day. It's totally
Yeah.
fair. Totally
What
fair.
about you? How do you feel? What gives you the
Um,
most energy?
yeah, that's a great question. I would say very similar, but my best days are when I get to solve when I get to solve problems and think outside the box.
Hmm.
And we're confronted with things that maybe we haven't experienced before, or we've got to figure out how to do something that, especially if it's not been done before. That really like professionally fires me up.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, I think and then but yeah, getting your mind engaged on solving things that you haven't done before, I think makes you just kind of a better person all around. Like you said, when you get home,
Yeah.
you're you've scratched that itch, and so you can be a better dad, better husband,
Yeah.
better all around guy.
Yeah. Well, and not to take it a deeper level, I know we're shutting it down, but even at a spiritual level, so I believe we're created to progress, to be in movement, right? And so when you're in movement, like you feel it, like there's just something in you that, can't check that box any other way. And so you just
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. We'll have to do another episode where we dive into that a little bit more.
Okay.
That'll be
Sounds good.
because yeah, I think no, I totally agree. I think that progression is a human need, and
Uh,
I think that yeah, when you stop progressing, when you're stagnant, that's those are tough times. Those are
yeah.
really mentally, emotionally, and even physically. It's yeah.
Yeah.
But Brett, this has been an awesome conversation, and I know we could go on for hours and hours, but we're gonna not monopolize your time.
Uh,
Where can people find you? How do people find you on socials? On where would we go to look?
yeah. So LinkedIn is where I spend personally my most social time. So just Brett Duncan, Brett with two T's. And then, we talked about the consulting firm, which is Strategic Choice Partners. The juice is thisisthejuice.com. But yeah, I think connecting with me on LinkedIn probably gets you where you need to go. And let me just say thank you. I've been very impressed with this podcast, what you put together, because it's going on, is it 2 years now?
Yeah, we're coming up on 2 years here pretty quick.
Yeah. And I appreciate you, asking me things, but I think what everyone needs to know and probably does know is, I mean, you've got all the answers too. Dave is well known in our space and has done a lot. And so listeners, you are very fortunate to have him with you like you do right here.
I appreciate that. I will argue that I have all the answers. That's why we bring experts like you onto the show.
Right. There's two you don't have, and that's what I get hired for. That's it.
Fair enough. But I would highly recommend Brett in this space. He's one of the best, and I'm not just saying that because I've been in the space a long time. I've seen a lot of different personalities come through here, but you've endured and you've proven yourself as one of the most valuable assets in the space. So congrats on your tenure and your success, and I wish you nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you, sir, and thanks for having me.
All right, and we'll see you guys all next time on the next episode of Built to Win.
That was Dave Fleming talking with Brett Duncan about why connection and authenticity still matter in direct selling. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you learned something from it, please share it with a friend or colleague who you think would also benefit. And if you're new to Built to Win, we invite you to go back and listen to our story from the beginning. You can find us wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And while you're there, please rate us and leave a review to let us know what you think of the show.